this is Barry Phillips with Reconnect. Thank you for joining with me today. Reconnect is a call to those who feel cut off or disconnected or have fallen through the cracks of religious systems. And maybe you're just out there all by yourself, not really knowing where to go or who to trust or what to do next. So, this is a cry for you. I call in out to you to let you know somebody knows that you're there, and we'd like to find a way to get you connected powerfully and meaningfully somewhere, at least online, so that we can learn to grow together. We need each other. So, Reconnect is all about trying to get us connected. If you're disconnected, you don't have to be. Let me just mention to you that if you're on Facebook and you'd like to be part of an online fellowship group, then in the search line, put in Remnant Reconnect and send me a friend request, and I'll be more than happy to add you on to our online community, now numbering almost 100. Just added someone from Australia. And so, by the way, if you are in the Perth, Australia area, and you are a follower of Hebrew roots, please contact me either on that page at Remnant Reconnect or go to my website, which is Remnant of Israel. Israel spelled Yisrael, remnantofisrael.com, and send me an email. I have a brother that just joined us there on Remnant Reconnect on Facebook, and he and his parents are by themselves needing some folks to fellowship with. If you're listening and you happen to be in Australia, please contact me and let me know so we can help get this guy connected with some folks and maybe have an opportunity to grow together with some people. I also have a blog site, that's not Remnant of Israel. My blog site is thereturning.net, thereturning.net. And so if you'd like to read about our journey together, go by there. I'm getting ready to update a page, and you should find some new reading there. On the Remnant of Israel site, there's a donate button if you'd like to support us, if you'd like to help us to increase our ministry opportunities. Please pray about perhaps clicking on the donate button and just letting the Father use you in whatever way that He would, one time, monthly, ever how you want to do it. And I'd really appreciate you going by and at least looking at that. So there it is. Thanks. Last week, I talked to you about dealing with the boundaries pertaining to the church. Now, this is about the third week now that we've been dealing with recognizing spiritual boundaries. And this is not something that I really learned a lot about when I was pastoring. And in the last dozen plus 14 years of Hebrew roots study, I really haven't heard a whole lot about it either. The closest thing I can think of that has provided any background whatsoever is in my studies pertaining to spiritual warfare and understanding how that demonic entities want to move along particular lines and boundaries that they recognize, and that certain cities are originated or constructed in such fashion as that they give adherence to certain principles. And so those who live within the boundaries of a particular region tend to struggle with certain things that are historically sown in that area. All that aside, I've done a teaching and a study on recognizing spiritual boundaries that I've offered in a few locations, and we've talked about dealing in spiritual boundaries with one another. And then last week about the spiritual boundaries in dealing with the church and its system and its people. Last week I mentioned again that I had two areas further that I wanted to go into. Well, I never got to that second area, and that's where I want to go today. And I think it's a very key area for us, and that is to recognize the spiritual boundaries in dealing with Yehuda, or in particular the Jews. Now, this is a touchy subject in our day. It gets all mixed up into Zionism and recognition of the state of Israel and whether you support Israel's governmental policies or not. I know in the church ranks that there is a underlying, I guess is the right word, an underlying anti Semitic spirit. I never realized this until I got out of the church system and began to look at some standard church doctrines and realized that they were anti Semitic in their origin. And we may or may not have time to get into that. That will be at the end if we do. Um, the focus, though, is not so much the state of Israel. Neither is it the Zionistic approach of the Jews need to return to the land of Israel and establish the Israeli economy and state and build up that nation, although I'm in favor of that. But I'm talking about the spiritual entity of the house of Yehuda, the Jews. Um, Especially with you and I looking at the Reformation, that's Reformation is not the right word, the reforming of the house of Israel. These peoples are the descendants of physically and spiritually from the exiled 10 tribes to the north. That goes all the way back to the days of Rehoboam and Jeroboam. And since 722 BC, these peoples have not been in the land of Israel to live as a people. These are the descendants of such tribes as Asher and Gad and Zebulun and Manasseh and Ephraim, etc. Those tribes have not been collectively back in the land for a very long time, almost 3,000 years, about 2,700 years plus. So we believe that we are either spiritual descendants or we are physical descendants to some degree. That's a very, very hard thing to prove. But we believe ourselves to be this collective body that the Father recognizes as the house of Israel, the house of Joseph, and the house of Ephraim, if you will. A lot of various names there. But now that we're beginning to recognize who we are and largely found in what's called the Hebrew roots, how do we deal with our brother Yehuda? There is, unfortunately, I'm understanding, even among us, an anti-Semitic attitude that says we don't need Yehuda, don't need the Jews, and we don't have to deal with them whatsoever. We're going to come back and we're going to rightfully take our place and we're going to do what it is that we do, and Yehuda will just have to deal with it. Well, I don't necessarily see that's what Yah has in mind. There is the attitude of we have to convert to Judaism in order to be accepted by the Jews. And so we cease being Ephraim or the house of Joseph so that we can become the house of Yehuda. I don't necessarily see that that's the plan that the Father has either. I think it's in the middle. We need to figure out who we are and become a collective whole so that we can properly relate to each other, build this house that the Father has given to us, reestablish the house of Israel as described in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 37, as the stick for Joseph. Right now, I think we're basically a pile of sawdust, and a good wind could scatter us to the winds. But we need to figure out how to stop being a pile of sawdust and become fibrous enough again that we can get reattached and build the stick for the house of Joseph in one hand that can be joined together with the house of Yehuda as a stick in the other hand. Bring them together and let them become one under the Father's design. Now, that's a tall order, but it can be done. As we look at it today, the question is that we want to examine: how do we deal with the house of Yehuda? Let's look at a little bit of history. There is a doctrine, commonly it's called replacement theology, where the basic idea is that the church replaces covenant Israel. Another larger, more theological term is supersessionism. That's even hard to spell, let alone pronounce. Supersessionism. And there are various components of this. There is one component, Hippolytus, Origen, and Luther promoted the idea that Jews who rejected Jesus as the Jewish Messiah are consequently condemned by God, that they forfeit the promises otherwise that would have been due to them under the covenants. There's another version that says that the nation of Israel and Yahweh's plans has been replaced by the role of the church. That's the more classic form. Justin Martyr promoted that. Augustine, he promoted that. Then there is a little deeper one that talks about the Hebrew Scriptures are largely indecisive for shaping Christian convictions about how that Yahweh will work, especially as the Redeemer. And so you get into the first half of the book has been replaced by the latter half of the book, and it's good stories back there, but we really don't need it. So if you take this a little bit further and how it's played its role down through the ages, you find that it has really been hard for the Jews to deal with the church whatsoever. There was some very influential writers that shaped some early thinking. Justin Martyr, going all the way back to A.D. 160, said, "The scriptures are not yours, but they're ours," speaking to a Jew. Irenaeus, Bishop of Lyon, declared, "Jews are disinherited from the grace of God." Tertullian said in his treatise against the Jews, he announced that God had rejected the Jews in favor of the Christians. Eusebius wrote in the 4th century that the promises of the Hebrew Scriptures were for the Christians and not for the Jews, and the curses were for the Jews. At the Council of Elvira in Spain, A.D. 305, declarations were made to keep the Jews and Christians apart, ordering Christians not to share meals with Jews, not to marry Jews, not to use Jews to bless their fields, and not to observe the Jewish Sabbath. In the Edict of Milan in AD 313, it granted favor to Christianity by outlawing synagogues. In AD 315, another edict allowed the burning of Jews if they were convicted of breaking laws. Of course, in 321, we're all familiar with the Constantinian creeds and so forth, honoring the sun to the exception of the Shabbat, etc., in the Council of Nicaea. Hilary of Porters in AD 291, he lived from 291 to 371, he wrote, "Jews are a perverse people accursed by God forever." Gregory of Nyssa, Bishop of Cappadocia, said, "The Jews are a brood of vipers, haters of goodness." And then Jerome wrote, saying that Jews were serpents wearing the image of Judas. Their psalms and prayers are the braying of donkeys. That's just a little bit. John Chrysostom said, "The synagogue is not only a brothel and a theater, it's also a den of robbers and a lodging for wild beasts." No Jew adores God. Jews are inverted murderers possessed by the devil. Their debauchery and drunkenness gives them the manners of the pig. They kill and maim one another. It's no wonder that there's an anti-Semitic spirit that is underlying the foundations of a lot of Christianity. Now, I'm not saying that all Christians are anti-Semites. By no means. There are a lot of good, solid Christian folks who are in favor of Israel, in favor of the Jews, pray for the Jews, seek to bless them, take tours of Israel, go over and support their businesses and their economy, love them, serve them, pray for them, minister to them. I mean, there's a lot of good that goes on. Denominationally, there is this idea, however, that is wrestled with about whether or not the church actually replaces Israel and the covenants. And what Yahweh intended originally with Abraham and the covenants that was given to Abraham, to Yitzhak, to Yaakov, and then to the people of Israel, that because they quote-unquote rejected Jesus and killed him, then all of these covenants now belong to the entity of the church. And Israel is going to be rejected, that they're going to be judged, and they're going to be made to pay for the rejection of Christ. Let me just sum all that up with one good word: garbage. There's no truth to any of that. The covenants are without repentance. Yah knew what he was doing when he chose Abraham and his descendants, and that choice is still vital, it's still valuable, and it's still intact. So how is it then that we are to relate to the Jews? We're not in the ranks of Christendom anymore. We're not Jewish. We're somewhere in the middle. What do we do? Well, let's recognize a couple important things. Number one, let's recognize that the Jews, they are scripturally the house of Yehuda, or Judah. And most importantly, in regards to that, we're not. They're the Jews. We're not. Now, that may sound like an oversimplistic idea, but I can't stress that enough. You and I can learn to speak conversational Hebrew. We can put on Jewish garb. We can put on an Orthodox suit and hat, and we can grow the curls down the side of our face, and we can allow our beard to grow out long. We can adopt their mannerism. We can study their words. We can read their Torah and learn it from their vantage point. And when we go to Israel and we try to conduct ourselves among them, they will spot us a mile away. And they know whether you are a Jew or not. My question is, why do we feel like that we have to become them in order to be accepted by them? They're looking for authenticity. They're looking for a genuine heart. They're looking for honesty. They're looking for sincerity. They're looking for a pure heart and an open mind. They're looking for a relationship that is not immediately requiring something from them. Being yourself is the greatest thing that you can do in order to learn to relate to someone who is Jewish. They're not asking you to be them when you're not. You know, if someone were to come to you from another culture and they tried to present themselves as an American when they're not, you'd know who they were. You would recognize, I don't know where you're from, but you're not from around here. And that's especially true in some of the areas that I've lived in. So why are you posing? Why are you trying to be what you're not? Our goal is to not violate their cultural boundary by trying to present ourselves to them as what we're not. Look, they are culturally Jewish. They have their mannerism, their patterns of speech, they have their perspectives, they have their days of worship, they have their understandings, their manners of doing business, and you can engage in all of that and enjoy the engagement and enjoy bartering with them as you go over and maybe do a tour. You can enjoy sitting down in their restaurants and asking questions about their cuisine. You know, that's all well and good. Enjoy the cultural difference. But when it comes to relating with them, the goal is to not offend them in their cultural boundaries. by trying to either present yourself to them as to what you're not, or more importantly, require them to become like you. One of the things that puts them off the most is, in order to discuss anything religious, they have to accept Messiah immediately, because that's the only vantage point that we understand. If we build a relationship with them and we're open and we're honest in our dealings with them, then Messiah will come up in his own time. But the goal is not to convert them to Christianity. The goal is not to force Yeshua down their throat. The goal is to present the heart of Messiah in your words, in your deeds, and the lack of your words. Sometimes you don't need to say anything. Just be honest, be sincere, and allow the heart of Messiah to be seen in them, or seen in us by them. Isaiah said this, Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not harass Ephraim. That word envy in the Hebrew is kinah. It means zealous passion or a religious zeal, becoming a rival toward. And it says then that Ephraim, the house of Joseph, is not going to exhibit zealous passion or religious zeal or jealousy or become a religious rival to Yehuda. In the past, there had been a lot of overzealous attempts to convert Yehuda to our versions and understandings. But it is not our scriptural goal to change Yehuda. That's not our calling. And I'm not saying that they don't need Messiah. I'm not saying that Yeshua is not for them. But Yeshua being presented by us in a zealous fashion where we're trying to corner them in a theological debate to where they have to acknowledge that he is authentically their Messiah, that's not going to work. They don't appreciate our evangelistic attempts and the manners that we have done them in the past. What they're looking for is honesty, sincerity, genuineness, and just to be a friend. Just to be an open and honest friend with them and a solid relationship. Then after a relationship with them has been established, at some point they'll ask questions. Answer their questions. Be honest. Use the short version. And let them follow up with following questions if they want to know more. But if they've never seen the heart of Messiah in you, then how are they going to hear his words out of your mouth? It has to be revealed in your heart and your deeds and your manner of being first before they will see the authenticity of Yeshua in your words and in your understanding. But here's the other side of this, and something that we need to realize. They also have a reality and a revelation about Yeshua that maybe you and I need to be willing to hear. If I'm not willing to hear what they've got to say, why should I expect them to be willing to hear what I've got to say? The goal is this. We can change ourselves. You and I can become more and more like Yeshua. That's something that we can work on. That's something that we can do. In relating with Yehuda, love them, pray for them, seek their blessing and their favor. Understand that the covenants are still with them. And let us also understand that they will find Messiah when they find him in your heart, not so much in your words. Until next time, this is Barry with Reconnect. Love you. I pray for you. May Yah's favor be with you. Shalom.
we are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.
Don't go away, your show will start after a brief pause.